Good morning and welcome to today's Audit Tuesday. So, in this session, YouAttest will spotlight applying the 80/20 rule to cybersecurity. So, to help explain the subject, we're lucky to have Michael Andrews, a cyber and solutions expert and GRC expert. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Ashley, thanks for having me. Hey, Garrett.
Thank you.
Hey, Kashif. Of
Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
course.
Greetings, Mike.
So,
Yeah.
first of all, Michael, can you please introduce yourself to the Audit Tuesday audience?
Yeah, my name's Mike Andrews. I'm a cybersecurity consultant for YouAttest. We're based here in Las Vegas and work with small to medium-sized U.S. businesses. We generally focus on risk assessments and helping strengthen overall cybersecurity. We also have a new SOC 2 and FedRAMP prep service to help companies that are interested in going through either process. At the same time, also still serving in the Ohio Air National Guard as the cyberspace operations officer, where we focus on cybersecurity, telecommunications, and networking, things like that. And glad to be
Very
here with you
cool.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, we love it. So let's get started. So, Mike, can you talk a little bit about what the 80/20 rule in cybersecurity is?
Yeah, so Garrett and I were talking about the snowflake incident, as a lot of people in our field were, and we both agreed that uh, the identity in cybersecurity is comparable to the 80/20 rule, right? Which is the Pareto principle that says that 80% of problems come from 20% of the causes, and we just feel that identity is really important, and there's a handful of reasons for that. One of which is that the process of verifying user and device identities helps control access to data. It helps prevent breaches, helps with user accountability, helps with threat detection, and it's also so big for compliance purposes since it's part of every framework or standard, such as NIST Cybersecurity Framework, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, HIPAA, SOX, and it's just absolutely critical to focus on identity.
And Garrett, I know Mike mentioned talking to you about it. So, what's your take on the 80/20 rule in cyber?
It has to happen. I mean, there's only so many of us. Only so many of us cyber people. So many Mikes in a company, and that's why enterprises need consultants to help out. But there's certainly so many inside. Look at the NIST CSF, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. Okay, those are all good. No one's going to look at Mike's shaking his on his head. No one looks at the cybersecurity framework and says, "Wow, what a bunch of unnecessary pablum." It's like real things we have to do. But unfortunately, there's a reality of what we have time for. I mean, just FYI, there's 23 categories of controls in the CSF and 108 subcategories. And, as Mike said, what about the SMBs? What about the city governments? What about these localities? What about that, right? How are they going to manage 108? There has to be prioritization. There has to be prioritization of what is the number one threats and vulnerabilities and take those and go from there. And just to be blunt, I mean, I think it starts with identity. Mike, I'm not going to steal your line about what you said about the 80/20 and our friends at the snowflake attack. Take it away.
Yep, that's my next question. So, Mike, in your practice, do you see wisdom in the 80/20 rule, especially with the talk about the hacking of identity of Snowflake accounts?
Yeah, I definitely see it even other than the snowflake incident. But
Good point.
as a lot of
Good
us
point.
have been talking about, Snowflake responded by saying that this issue happened because of no fault of their own with their platform, and that it was actually due to the lack of multi-factor authentication on a bunch of their customer accounts. And then when the incident happened, Snowflake brought in Mandiant, who's one of the biggest cybersecurity companies, to help with incident response. And they found that it was really about 165 of the customers that had data stolen from them. And it looks like it goes back to historical info stealer related incidents all the way back to 2020 when COVID happened. And we were joking earlier that from Snowflake's perspective, they might view identity as the 100-0 rule, which is even bigger than the 80-20 rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Garrett, what are your thoughts on the 80-20 rule and Snowflake?
Yeah, let's start with Snowflake. So what was actually documented, what was stated, et cetera, right? What they said is, okay, get it. Our accounts have been hacked. That's what they said. Our accounts have been hacked. And then they did their due diligence. There was a posting. If y'all want to look it up, there was a posting. I'm not going to get myself in trouble, where someone claimed that it was a flaw in the software, et cetera. That post was taken down. Okay. And then what was stated by Snowflake and then others is that it was identity related. Yes, lack of 2FA. Okay, but they went on. They said also it was exponentialized because of over-privileged accounts, right? Which is what, Ashley and I have been on these, things for a couple of years telling people. I go, accounts are going to be overtaken, Mike. I don't think I'm saying something really, really shocking there, But once they get overtaken, right? What have you just exposed yourself with, right? If it's someone with a limited Salesforce account, okay, that's okay. But if that account has also admin or privileges and has AWS privileges, as you'll see in our demo, and it has AD privileges, right? You're in a lot of trouble. I mean, that has gone from a single identity hack to a enterprise-wide problem. And that's what has been happening. That's what happened. So they said lack of 2FA. This is from our friends, at Snowflake. Overprivileged accounts. And the last one, unmonitored accounts. And I see unmonitored accounts as things like what happened in your neck of the woods, Mike, those little casinos, right? Those, very, poor little guys, right? Ones like Caesar and MGM, right? And their IAMs were overtaken and they were owned. I mean, not like, an account was taken. No, the IAM was owned and they put in rules and new managers in those IAMs, right? And that's why they had said they caused such damage. Unmonitored accounts include, do you know the privileges of those accounts and the privilege changes in those accounts, right? Okay, some normal users there, and now all of a sudden there's all these group permissions and admin rights. Is that known? And that's what, and God bless them, like they're saying, hey guys, if this is happening, their viewpoint was, if this is happening, we can't protect you. Right, Mike? Isn't that pretty much what they said? They said, if you're not putting there a 2FA, if you got overprivileged accounts and you got unmonitored accounts, this is the product itself is not a flaw, it's the driver of the car.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Sorry. It just goes back to the cloud model in general, how the cloud platform, they do security of the cloud, and the customer is responsible for doing security in the cloud. They Snowflake and other cloud platforms can provide the tools, but if you don't turn them on, there's nothing they can do about it.
So the lack of following these basics have caused attacks, right, Garrett?
Absolutely. And that's where I agree with the statements. Okay. It's like, it's like a whole nother tangent when Mike and we'll get some other people to talk about the problems with AI. I'm like, there's no problems with AI. It's fine. There's no problems with identity. There's no problems with networks. There's no problems with ever. We just have to manage them correctly, right? I mean, if you're putting things on the internet, everything's SaaS-based now, right? Including our cloud infrastructure is SaaS-based. It's just a different mechanism once you get in there. Okay, what are we doing? And that's why, I mean, when we do this demo, to jump into it, Mike, you can comment on top of Kashif. He's going to go through, what most people are using. They're using, AWS, right? And we're going to go through with how do you actually ensure that the users have 2FA on, right? How do you ensure that the privileges are right? How do you ensure the entitlements? And Mike, that's what we're always seeing, right? someone does a macro, and that's what I call it, a macro provisioning. Great. What did you give him access to? Oh, he's provisioned. He's part of the company now. Great. Have you looked at segregation of duties? Have you looked at over privileges? What's your scoring system? How often are we reviewing? And a real dumb question, Mike, who's actually reviewed, right? Is it the guy who's the AD admin and he goes, yeah, that looks right. That looks right. Or is it actually the way NIST, PR, AC-6 and 1.1 spells out that it should actually be reviewed by someone who actually has knowledge, the business owner and or the manager of that user? So yes, Ashley, answer your question. There's no question, and I call it sloppy. Others can have a more professional name for it. Sloppy identity practices cause hacks. And that's, I didn't write the press release for Snowflake, but that's basically what they messaged, right? Is that they said, Snowflake itself, there is no discernible flaw in Snowflake. That's their messaging. Identity practices and the identity practices of how, and I would say most enterprises are doing it today, are causing us to be hacked.
So this sounds like the basics. So would you consider these part of the 80-20 rule? And are these the main types of identity related vulnerabilities?
That's a Mike answer that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Snowflake, they did provide the option for the companies on their platform to use multi-factor authentication, but the way it is now, the way it was when this happened, it was not enforced because they want to give companies flexibility. They don't want to lose a client because they're being too stringent with security. But what was interesting, I read an article that came out on Friday and said they're strongly considering making it mandatory to use it, which is kind of forceful.
Okay, I'm going to jump in that.
It is,
Mike. Isn't that what the measures are? Right? You know a lot about CMMC. What does that stand for? I was on a call this morning. I can't remember.
CMMC is the for the defense industrial base. Yeah. That's the cybersecurity maturity model certification.
Yeah, always put the military guy on on the spot. No, but basically that's what CMMC, PCI DSS, SOC 2, they're spelling out what people should be doing. This is not like suggested. Ask our friends, right, Mike, over at SolarWinds, right? Is what you're stating in your 10Ks and your 8Ks, right? And stating, is that a hey, that's a nice to have, or is that mandatory? Basically, those are regulations. And they're guidances that come from the NIST and the other standards, right? But they're actually regulations that say we have to be putting this stuff in.
So, Mike, why do so many of these attacks seem to start with identity?
Well, with the identity, it kind of controls, well, it does control who and what gets onto your system, which is a big part of it, right? Like identity, even in other security related areas of life, like us locking our door and only letting in people we know, checking IDs, the bouncers checking IDs at clubs, airlines checking boarding passes, hotels having key cards. It's all identity related. So to me, it makes sense that so many of these incidents are related to identity.
Garret, do you have any other thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, well, let's go through the litany of what people call cloud, right? Once upon a time, well, it's actually always been the same. App guys think of cloud as SaaS. And I, guilty as charged. My brain is configured to be SaaS. But you talk to a programmer, he thinks cloud is PaaS, platform as a service. No, dude, Garret, that's where I code. That's where I make this stuff. And then our infrastructure guys think of it as IaaS, however you want to say it, IaaS, right? Infrastructure as a service. Okay, what's the commonality of all these? And I can keep going. I'm not gonna, promote, Gartner or Forrester, terminologies. These are all resources that are in someone else's computer bank, and you use an identity to get into them, often a shared identity. I love SSO. Ashley and I made our livings off of SSO. Okay. So, but there's no way I would argue that SSO has also made us more vulnerable, right? Because we're using the same ID, and there's the great mechanism of the SAML token or the OID tokens hops us from one to the other. So you hack into one, and voila, you're having a good time. Okay, so that makes identity, as Mike said, not even the 80. In some cases, the 100% problem. Is that we got to know what our identities have access to. We got to know how we're, authenticating them. That's your 2FA. But I think the real challenge going forward is how are people going to be authorizing? And what have you authorized? Do you even know what you authorized into, right? And that's where I say it's identity. I think it's the proliferation in a good way. We all got in computers to raise productivity. And that's why I always get mad when anyone says, well, the cloud's dangerous. I'm like, yeah, so is breathing. We got to do it. AI is dangerous. I'm like, no, it is what it is. Raise kids, find out what's dangerous. Okay, all good. So all good. No more analogies. Take it away, Ashley.
And Michael, so shouldn't these accounts be reviewed for 2FA, access privileges, and ghost accounts?
Absolutely. Identity is definitely a process that's kind of like a life cycle, and you need to tend to that identity for each user or device from the point where it's created, at the points where it's changed, all the way until it's deleted. Because say you have a person, they leave the company, and you don't remember to delete their account, that becomes a ghost account, and that is an exposed surface area that's just waiting to be exploited.
So, Garrett, we're going to run some demos and then take some questions.
100%. And dear audience, please stay on through the demos because that's really the point. But afterwards, YouAttest and YouAttest have come up with I don't know how we didn't think of this, the Y and Y specials, okay, to help you with your identity challenges. All the stuff we laid out here, right? And it's one thing to sit here and go, oh, there's a problem, the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Okay, what are you doing about it? Mike and Garrett, you're good at just making people afraid. Well, no, there's actually an offer at the end to help you out with this stuff. But let's start with some demos to show you why you should be working with and thinking about this stuff. Take it away, Kashif. I believe you're going to start with an IaaS, basically the AWS and how the 2FA and the privileges should be audited.
Right. So thank you, Garrett. We're going to focus primarily on what you said earlier on regarding the 2FA. So here in one of the audit campaigns that we have created out of AWS, where we have pulled the identities and the entitlements to show who has access to what and who is part of which group and what policy has been applied to those identities. We pulled this data out of AWS through a connector that we have built for AWS environments through their IAM. We pull these entitlements in there. And when you look at the details, we are pulling information whether the MFA status is enabled or disabled for this particular user, whether the password age is more than 90 days, 45 days, or whatever, or when was the last login activity. So when we have these information being pulled right directly from AWS, we can mitigate this in real time, and MFA could be a problem if it's disabled. So somebody needs to look into that. So when we follow the mechanism YouAttest has introduced by delegating these users and these identities to the right people within the organization, they also see these MFA disabled or password age going beyond what it should be, and they can take care of that problem in the real time instead of when it's too late and they're trying to come up with an RCA or root cause analysis, what happened and what caused this. So that's what we can pull. This is going to be enabled soon in our other IAMs like Azure AD or Entra ID and so forth, and we'll be able to pull the last password change and 2FA enable or disable status for all the users. Now, when it comes to security and compliance, let's say you want to create an audit to see who has access to some of your resources or all of your resources. So I'll take an example of an application that is part of my Entra ID. For example, users are being authenticated through my Entra ID into that resource. So I need to know who is accessing that resource using my Entra ID environment. I can easily, after the integration, which is a very easy process, a few step process, which doesn't take more than 60 minutes. That's our deployment time for this tool. And once it's deployed, you can easily create application audits. You can see who has access to the groups you have created. And then you can go with the individual user audits to see what those users, for example, privileged users, admin users, what are they accessing? What kind of privileges do they have? So you can target those individual IDs as well. So let me just show you the flow and see how you can deal with ghost accounts. You can deal with orphan accounts or anything or any identity that does not need to be there. How do you deal with those by using this tool we call YouAttest? So I'll just select my API source, which in this case is my Azure AD, or now called Entra ID, and I'll just give it a name according to the relevance. For example, if you're doing an audit for an application, you can start with an application name, and then you need to give a time frame within which you would like your reviewers, your managers to complete the task. Upon clicking next, you will see all the applications that are part of your IAM environment. In this case, Entra ID. So all these applications are being authenticated through my Entra ID, and I can find out who has access to these resources, either in bulk or by targeting a single application at a time. So once done, it's going to fetch the information in real time, just the metadata, not the credentials, just the metadata, show you the entitlements, and let you decide what do you want to do with those identities and those entitlements. So for example, I have these 4 people that have access to the app called Finance 01. I have these owners, application owners, I have the managers this user is reporting to, and then I have, under more details, the roles, the status, last password change information, last login
And
information.
Kashif, I'm going to interrupt one second. So, Mike, I mean, you work with tons of companies, right? And you've been involved. Aren't most enterprises struggling with this manually with spreadsheets and emails and all that?
Yes, definitely the case. And you'll see a lot of smaller companies deal with it a little longer because it's easier to say you only have 15 or 20 people in your startup. That's kind of manageable, right? You can look through that pretty quickly. Where it gets to be overwhelming is when it's a couple hundred people, upwards of 1,000. It's really, even if you could do it without using a tool like YouAttest, it's really hard once you get in those big numbers, especially if you're doing it right and you're checking in with like the supervisors, managers that know what people are working on and what systems they need access to. Even that communication mechanism in itself is hard because you'll send an email and say, hey, is Steve still on your team, still needs access to these 6 systems? And people have so much going on. A lot of times you just won't even get a response. So at least with YouAttest, it can automate a lot of that and just make it so those managers can respond with a couple of clicks and say, yes, that's fine, or no, that's not fine. We need to make a change.
Yeah, and I've seen it reported that the manual processes, that the errors in those are up to like 60%. because people look at a spreadsheet, it's all fine, rock and roll, you know what I mean? Or they don't open, or they don't, whatever. Whereas this is right, clear, succinct, and as Kashif showing, has the data relevant to that manager, right? What's that old Ogilvy advertising thing, Mike, right? It says, how long should you make your script for an advertisement? He goes, I can make you read the whole book. And he goes, how's that? This book is about Mike Andrews. And then holds up the book, it says you would read this whole thing, right? And that's
Yeah.
exactly what Kashif is showing, right? We're showing the reviewers only what they should be reviewing. That's the magic of it. So they're very interested. They will point out the orphan accounts. I got rid of that guy 2 months ago, or that guy was now managed by Sally. I'm going to delegate it over. That's the beauty of the YouAttest product, is that it makes the review and gives the information only relevant to that reviewer.
Right.
Take it away, Kashif. Yep.
So that's the part where you see all the details. But the good thing is the same details travels to the reviewer once you delegate that information to that manager or to the application owner or to the group owner. So they can see what they're dealing with, right? So there are two ways. One is the auto delegation that the tool itself detects who is the manager this ID is reporting to, which you can see here. The manager's email has been provided, but then also it gives you a choice if you want to delegate it out to the application owner instead of the manager. So you have both options when you go for auto delegation. But in the manual delegation, let's say you don't want to send this out to either of these two individuals, but you have a whole different set of reviewers that you want to involve in the process. Could be the CISO, could be the security or IT director, or could be the compliance manager. So you can involve those individuals, multiple reviewers in one audit if you don't want to send it out to the manager or to the application owner. So that's where the manual delegation comes in. So let's say, I just want to show you the workflow here by delegating this out to the manager and see what happens. Now this green bar pops up, which means that the tool has started delegating this out to these managers here, and it displays it under delegated actions. So I have delegated this out to this manager here. And just for a moment, if I assume my role as a manager, this is what I get in real time. So I get an email notification or I get a Slack notification along with the link to the audit. And once I open up the audit, I'll only see a subset of what you see as an admin. So as a risk manager, maybe you have 2,000 users, 2,000 IDs that you pulled from your IAM, from your Azure or Entra ID, for example, from that application. But there are only two people reporting to me. I'm their manager, so I'll be only able to see those two individuals. Here I go and see the notification. Something has been assigned to me by the name Demo5. And once I go in there, I only see these two users, Mark and Share. Now I get to decide what do we do with these identities. By looking at the details, I know these people because they work in my department. So I'll be confident either by certifying their access or by revoking their access. Let's say Mark Gibson, I'm good with this. I certify. That's my recommendation. But this other person here, either he has left the organization, in which case I'll recommend to revoke this identity, or he has moved departments. Now he reports to Ashley. So instead of sending it back to the admin, I'll redelegate this person to the right manager, which is Ashley today for this account, for this user ID. So in this case, let's say I have recommended to revoke this user from accessing this application. That's all I have to do as a manager, right? I can get back to my day job, but when I go back to my admin role, let's say I'm Kashif now, I see the progress here. The manager has recommended for these two users, one to be certified, the other one's to be revoked. And as Mike was mentioning before, that you have to write emails and follow up with those guys to find out what the progress is on this audit. We have automated this whole process by introducing these notification templates, and a nag email or the reminder email is one of these templates that we have automated, which you can always modify according to the situation. You can change the text, but most importantly, instead of putting a reminder in your Outlook or in your email system, whatever you're using, you can set the reminder over here, which enables you to decide how frequently you would like this message to go out to these
And I have to
individuals.
jump in on that one, Kashif, because I had some
Please.
fun with Mike because he took his governance exam a couple of years ago. That was your CGEIT, which I can't remember what I just took it on Sunday. And Kashif, what's completely relevant in audience is one of the questions on the exam is how should you be, what's the preferred way basically of doing your governance in an automated process? And what you're showing here is not someone's wantonly making up an email. We got a template fashion that here is the message, that this person will always see this message on a repeatable beta, so you can have an automated process to the review, right? With a known outcome. That's literally a couple of questions on the exam. So all good.
Yeah. I mean, it's not only, you can decide what the message should be when it's within the due date, but also after, when it's overdue, you can decide, you can change the message, you can modify, make it more pressing, and decide the frequency. It should go every single day to these users, keep reminding them to complete the task until they do. So that's when it stops sending out these notifications.
And y'all, I would be remiss, and Ashley would throw a pen at me for not mentioning that we have Karina Clever is helping out on those. We have these prep sessions with a great GRC expert, Karina. So she might even be so high. Anyways, keep going,
Yeah.
Kashif. Yeah.
All right, so let me just, for this demo, let me be the second reviewer and complete the audit, just to show you what it looks like when it's at 100%. So I'll just certify the rest of the two identities. Now my audit is complete. All I have to do is go back to my listings page where I have created this audit. I'm the admin, I'm the risk manager, so I can do these executions by completing the audit. So once I lock this audit out by marking it as complete, it will let me execute all the revocations that were recommended by these reviewers inside this audit. I can execute this from within this tool into my Azure AD or Entra ID on an application level. So you have two choices. You can execute those revocations either on that application level, so that user doesn't have access to the application, or on on an overall user access level into Entra ID, so they don't have access to the environment at all. But when we talk about revocations, we are only talking about suspending or deactivating a user account. We don't delete or remove the user account. We let the company follow their own internal protocol. If they want to, keep that account for 30 days, 60 days, or whatever, and then somebody from IT can go in and remove that account for good. That's up to them. We only deactivate or suspend that account from accessing that particular resource. At the end, the gist of the whole process is the report, the evidence, which we provide both in PDF as well as in CSV. If you're dealing with a few hundred people, a few hundred identities, the PDF makes more sense. Otherwise, thousands of users will be more convenient to accommodate on a CSV file, CSV report. So this is what it looks like. Plus, your comments, they become justifications. Why did you revoke somebody's access? You can put a comment in there, and that comment becomes your justification being part of this report over here, as well as in CSV format as well. So that's the whole workflow. But this was just the IAM where we plugged into your, let's say, Entra ID and pulled the entitlements from the applications, the groups. What about those applications that are not in sync with your Entra ID? They are legacy applications sitting there for about a decade or more than a decade, and they don't sync into your cloud AD or something. So how do you go about identifying your orphan accounts or doing your reviews for those applications? Well, we have a perfect solution for that as well. We call it the CSV import. So whatever resource you have, you can, as long as that resource, you can export the users and their permissions and roles onto a CSV file. We ingest that CSV, information into YouAttest and create an audit out of that data. So it doesn't matter if you have something that is not connected to your IAM. All you need to do is export the information onto a CSV file and upload it to YouAttest. And once uploaded, YouAttest will have that information for you in this format right here. So this is one of the CSV audits. I have 4 users, and it looks something like this when you go in. You won't see a difference. You will have the user profile attributes, the email ID, the user's manager, under more details, whatever you have on your CSV files and the headers, we will pull that information into this audit and display it to you in this way so that it's easier and convenient for your reviewers when you delegate these to them to decide whether to certify or revoke these identities. The only difference is the execute option will not be available for these audits because there is no connection between those applications and your AD or your IAM. So only in that case, you can go ahead and download the report in either form, CSV or PDF format, and hand it over to your IT desk or your help desk to execute those revocations manually. So, but we still provide some automation even in the resources that are not connected to your IAM. We can still fetch their user status in your IAM today, because we're using email ID as a unique identifier, which will be common on both sides, your IAM and the siloed application that is not connected to your IAM. So Kashif at youattest.com will be there in IAM as well as in a Finance 01 application that has been sitting there for a decade. So we cross-reference those identities on both sides and pull the user status and who is the current manager of that ID. Once you have that information in an ongoing audit, you can easily delegate or auto-delegate these individuals to their relevant managers. So the process after this is pretty much the same as I described in the application audit, and same report you'll get at the end of the process when you're doing a CSV audit as well. Right, Garret, anything else you would like me to cover in this session?
I think let's take it away, Ashley. I'll let you drive or so.
Perfect. Thank you, Kashif. So let's go over the offer and then go to the questions. So
Perfect.
actually, let's start with the questions. So Mike, what are the items in your gap analysis for security for an enterprise?
It would depend on if we're working with a company that's already familiar with using the NIST cybersecurity framework or the NIST or CIS-18, the Center for Internet Security, or something else. We don't want to recreate the wheel unless we need to. When I go to a company, I kind of look at their current maturity level to see what's best to do. Like if a company has never talked about cybersecurity, for example, it wouldn't make sense to use one of the more advanced frameworks and then just say, oh, bad. Like in that case, might start with like a benchmark review and just run through their Google Workspace, for example, and just see how well it aligns with best practices, and then just it really differs from company to company if you're doing it right to get each company what they need.
And Garret, how long does YouAttest take to deploy?
Yeah, that's the revolution of the product. Is basically what we do. You can get this thing up and running and start doing your audits today. And if you have as someone who actually knows the product like Mike, he can get you guys started in a couple of hours, right? Just get this connected into your system, get the resources in there, and you guys can start doing your audits that day.
So, Mike, is this identity auditing, is that relevant to SOC 2?
No, it's a big part. It's yeah, every time any company that wants to do a SOC 2, any company pursuing SOC 2 compliance will have to be thinking about identity, whether they're pursuing the type 1, which is one-time snapshot, or the type 2 that is over a period of time. There's no way to avoid it, right? We have to control who's getting on our systems, whether it's a user or other devices.
And
Yeah.
Garret, what about identity automation of changes?
Yeah, and we got our SOC 2, and we had to do that. So yes, it's relevant to that. They actually shaking her head because she was a part. And I'm sorry, I always overtalk because I'm a Chicagoan. Ashley, what was the question again?
What about identity automation of changes?
Exactly. I don't know. You know, we can show this product because Kashif knows this on like the back of his hand and both sides of his hand. Just don't show your hand, Kashif, because I know it was injured. But there you go. Is that the one that was injured, or was it the other? What we have is put in triggers. Remember that scenario I was talking about in Mike's neck of the woods? You know, the hacks at the casinos where admin accounts were changed and manipulated, right? Our customers have turned this on, not the GRC part, but the cyber part of the customers have turned it on where you can get automated alerts if there's privilege escalations. You know, someone, Kashif started this demo things with the AWS and he went to Azure, right? Wouldn't you want to know if someone is all of a sudden an admin and get triggered on that? That's what's in the product. Yes. Okay.
Perfect. So, Michael, I know you have a special offer, so why don't you share it with our audience?
I'll shoot a screen and you talk. How's that? And in theory, I'll show the right window. Am I showing the right window, Ashley?
Yep, you're good.
Looks correct. Yeah. So I'm a big believer that if you're going to talk about something, it's always good to have something that you can contribute to actively make a difference in that area. So Garret and I were talking about some different possibilities, and we wanted something that can help any company, whether it's small or maybe has a couple hundred people, whether they have a cybersecurity team or person already, or maybe they're working with a contractor. But we have an offer that's just identity focused, that includes consulting from our end, and then software, which is the awesome product you guys just showed. So on my end, we would start. It's going to be $999 per 250 accounts, which that's a lot. It could be a lot, or maybe your bigger company might need to might be 500 accounts. But what we're going to do is we're going to start out by reviewing the data classification plan to see what types of data you work with, where it's located, whether it's on 3 different systems, 10 different systems, who has access to it. Because all this stuff, all the identity, the data is foundational, right? Like if you have payment card data, that's different than if you only have party planning data, for example. So we'll get that all figured out. And once we know that, then we'll look at the existing group and role structure that's in place and just assess that and then come up with some optimal ways to do that. Then after we have that, we'll look at things like single sign-on, make sure that's configured properly, username and password structure. When I say that, I don't mean looking at everyone's passwords. I mean just kind of reviewing the settings. Do you require 14 characters, 12 characters, uppercase, lowercase, number, special characters, and make sure that's right. And then just look at the multi-factor authentication. And as part of this, we'll do it not just in the company's identity store, but also in those other places, those siloed applications like Kashif was talking about. So say you're an accounting firm and you have QuickBooks. You'll probably also have a CRM, maybe HubSpot, maybe Salesforce. We'll take a look at that too, right? Because we have to look at it based on where's the data to do this properly. And I'm just excited to be able to help companies just improve in this area.
Perfect.
That's great.
So
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Ashley. And yeah, we're throwing in a discount with this. And we believe in this model. We really do. I mean, that question about the gap analysis, that's how this works good. Mike goes in there, he shows you what you need to do. Overdoing isn't doing anyone any favors, right? And then, bring us in for the identity stuff, and then you get a full solution. And I'm sorry, Ashley, take it away.
no worries. So Mike, can you tell the audience how they can get a hold of you at YouAttest?
Yeah, I'm happy to connect with anyone online. I'm on LinkedIn daily. You can look me up on my name. Last name spelled funky. Last name Andrews. I'm Mike Andrews. And you can also find Yastis on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and X by just searching Yastis and looking for the blue Y logo.
Cool. And then we at YouAttest can be reached at youattest.com or just email us at info@youattest.com. Thank you so much to our audience, and thank you, Mike, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Of
thank you,
course.
Ashley. Great job. Thank you, Kashif. All the best. Good talking, Mike. Thanks. Bye.